Hello everyone and happy International Women's Day and welcome to today's panel conversation. Before we start, somewhere here is a Q&A function that you can use to share maybe your own experiences with the group today and submit some more questions. So once this is said, welcome to our panelists, all great women leaders of ISG, Namrata, Jill and Anna. I am really so excited to facilitate this panel because before today, when we got to know each other in our one-on-ones, we talked about your professional lives, your hobbies and personal journeys, and really inspiring careers and the role of women in their work lives. And already, I have the feeling that your stories might be very much influential for us today. Let me do just a brief introduction of the three of you. So welcome, Jill. We have met first in the context of training as a service to build that solution for ISG together. And you joined ISG at the end of last year to become the lead of ISG Enterprise. And next we have Anna. You have been with ISG for over 2 years and you took over as our partner of insurance last year. And then we have you, Namrata. You're the Chief Business Leader of India Research, recently also joining the ISG Provider Lens. And you have been with ISG the longest, over 8 years. So thank you everyone for being here today. So before we start, I'd like to say a few words. So each of you is so very unique with your own journeys, strengths, leadership qualities, and all of our prior conversations really make me better understand our world as we celebrate this today. And that is why I am burning to hear even more of your inspiring stories. So, how about having that quick fire round with the first question? So, what did you do, or what would you want to be when you grew up? And what was your journey like? Who would like to take the first question?
Oh, well, I can share what I wanted to be when I was growing up, Sandra. The
Thank
very
you.
first thing that I wanted to be was a gardener, very specifically a gardener of radishes. I had a vegetable patch full of radishes, and every morning I would go outside and dig them up to see how much they'd grown overnight before putting them back in the ground again. And I suspect my dad might have been planting new ones all the way along in the background. I didn't fail. After that, honestly, I would love to say that, I developed a burning passion for a certain career and followed that all the way through my formative years, my teenage years into education. This really wasn't the case. Following, the expiry of my love of the radish gardening, I bounced about with all sorts of different ideas, all the way from being a vet to a doctor to a hairdresser, you name it. So I had all sorts of ambitions and aspirations that when I was growing up.
Thank you, Jill. So, who is next?
Yeah, sounds what Jill mentioned. It sounds really familiar to me. Lots of ideas during my grown up. So first of all, I wanted to be a pilot, to become a pilot, and then just the same, you name it, different things. Probably the most funniest. I wanted to become an artist and paint all the time. And later on, I studied physics. So it's completely different things. And at the end, to be honest, somehow during consultant or in the consulting, you combine all the things. You're flying all the time. And also looking to get the nice presentation and solving complex problems like physicists and mathematicians like this.
Super. Thank you. And Namrata.
Awesome, very interesting stories there. I'm sure when I say this, a lot of them can relate to it. So when I was growing up, my dad only kept a couple of options in front of me. I either become an engineer or a doctor, and I'm sure many of them will relate to that. I didn't become either of them. That's a different story altogether. But my dad holds me to it even now. It's like, had I been there, I would have got you enrolled into engineering. I'm like, no, I'm happy where I am. But I did want to explore animation, and get into the field of a little bit of advertising and cartoons. That was something that I was looking to actually grow, but yeah, I think the closest that I could come is research for ads. So that's where I started off my career with.
Thank you very much. Super. And let's just go into a conversation now. So before this panel, I had the chance to talk to each of you. And one common denominator is that all of you had great mentors, coaches, like a really well support system that guided you along your way. So the question would be, how did you find that mentor, or did the mentor maybe find you, and how did they support you?
Well,
Great
let me
question.
take this one. So, to be honest, I wasn't searching for a mentor. She just appeared, right? It was not in the very beginning of my career. It was probably 7 years after I already started. And it was just a great personality, great woman I met in my life. And to be honest, if I'm asking myself now, if it's by chance that she is a woman, or it was just I wasn't looking for a woman. it was as a person, and she was just like me. So I thought she was like me. Was married with the children, and was an amazing leader. She was a CIO at E.ON. I was at E.ON. I spent at E.ON a couple of years in my life, and she was a CIO for a German sales organization. As really power woman, a very structured one, and she managed to balance between the family life and private life, and very good leadership style. Yes, and so I just decided she's a mentor. It was not something documented, right? I was just looking at her and had a lot of discussion with her, and it was like this, and it helped me a lot because for women, I think it's important to understand everything is possible. And if you see such an example in front of you, you believe yes, everything is possible. Even it's possible if you have children. Even it's possible if you have family. Even it's possible if you are not a robot, and if you have your limitation and so on. So it was a great experience for me, and I'm still after a lot of years in touch with her. She is still a very very great personality and a mentor for me.
Yeah, it's such a powerful thing to build those strong connections and bonds. Absolutely.
Jill, do you want to go ahead?
Absolutely, thanks, Namrata. So if I think back, oddly enough, maybe or maybe not actually, maybe not at all, the mentors that have coached, supported me, and been the most formative in contributing to helping me to achieve the things I've achieved to date have been men, actually. And I think my first really sort of meaningful experience probably dates back to about 2008, 2009, something like that. Shortly after I had left the world of operations and moved across into consulting, I joined a small consultancy. And within reasonably quick succession, two of the partners at that consultancy became very interested in my career and my development. I can remember sitting on the tube one day in my very, very early years, on the way back from a meeting with a client, which I think I had so many sleepless nights, getting so nervous on the run up to this big meeting to present back the findings of, my first real sort of client deliverable. And the partner that had been with me said to the tube, he said, "Did you see what happened there today, Jill?" And I said, I was just glad it was over and done with, to be honest. And he said, they were so engaged in listening to you and listening to what you were saying. And so I had to think about this, and I thought, that it had really been a positive, interaction with the client. And, after I got over my nerves and just the sheer relief of having this thing over and done with. And then, from there, I started to work quite closely also with the second partner at the firm. And I think really, I would summarize it as these men somehow recognized in me qualities which they saw as strengths, but I may have perceived at the time as weaknesses, because I was comparing myself a lot to people around me. And guess what? Most of the people around me were men. And so I wasn't exactly demonstrating some of the more sort of male types of characteristics. And, I perceived that as a difference, and I think I perceived it negatively. And of course, difference is certainly not always negative. Many, many times, oftentimes, it's a positive thing. And being able to embrace difference and recognize that bringing a different, I can't, even tell you how many clients have said to me, and after a while I started taking as a compliment, "You're not like a normal consultant, are you?" To start with, I thought, okay, this seems like something bad. But no, these two men recognized something in me which I was unable at that point in time to recognize in myself, and took it upon themselves in different ways to coach me, to support me, to help to give me a leg up when I needed one, to maximize, on my abilities. They had a faith in me, and still do to this very day, much like Anna. They're still very much part of my life. Had a faith in me, which I struggled to have in myself for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Amazing story. Thank you for sharing. Namrata.
Yes, I think Anna said she had a lady mentor. Jill said she had mostly men mentors. I have to say I've had a mix of both, to be very honest. So I've been really lucky to have fantastic bosses all through my career who've not just been my managers, but they've been also amazing mentors. Whether it's constant guidance, the support, the encouragement, motivation. I think I've really had been lucky to kind of get the good share of everything. And most importantly, I think with each one of my bosses, they have pushed me to get out of my comfort zone, because it's always easy. I think it's just the human tendency to just sit where we are. But every single one of them have pushed out of my comfort zone to achieve something different, to learn something new, and that has been a fabulous journey. I wouldn't have achieved what I've really achieved today had it not been for every single one of those managers and bosses who have actually encouraged me. So it's going to be hard for me to just put a finger on one person and say she or he is my mentor, but I've really had some fabulous bosses.
Mm-hmm. And of course, the constant encouragement coming from those mentors and constant feedback and also proactive feedback is such a powerful thing for your own development. That's right. And because we already mentioned it, we're still working in a very man-dominated domain here. So how could you say, or how would you bring your authentic self to work? Just being you with all your female qualities as well.
Maybe I can go on that one, is that I've never had to try hard to kind of, prove myself, or I think I was clear on the objectives. I had the aim to say that, or my keenness to learn was always there. I was eager to learn. I was eager to build on my continuous improvement aspects. And then, my goal was clear. So I think just keeping that objective in mind and working towards that, it's not like I had to put in an extra effort or go out of the way to really prove myself. It came naturally when I knew this was my goal and this is how I need to work, and this is where I need to kind of go. So I think it's just me being me. I was, that's all that I carried myself. I just carried myself to the work. I'm not different at home. I'm not different at work. It's just the same Namrata everywhere that comes along. That's about it.
Thank you. Anna, would you like to go next?
Yeah, to be honest, started very early, studied physics in the main domain, right? But to be honest, I never faced any challenge or any limitation. So it's hard to me to say what need to be done, because haven't seen any problems, any differences there. I just think it's focus on what has to be done. What do you have to say? And just be yourself. What do you do?
Thank you.
I think very, very similar to what you've just said, Anna. I can't really think back to any particular scenario in which I've faced a struggle or any barriers or any blockers to achieving goals that I've set for myself. But what I have certainly observed, and this is probably the benefit of a bit of age-related wisdom, is that where I've done my very best has always been in those situations where I have just been myself. And I think that's a very easy thing to say and a much less easy thing to do.
Mm-hmm, you're right. And I know when we go back to the conversation that we had prior, there was also the two leadership styles that women have in those men-dominated domains. And would you like to tell us about that, Jill?
Yeah, I think when we did our sort of pre-meeting, Sandra, I earlier in my career, I certainly observed two sort of archetypes, if you like, of female leader when I was looking around me at the senior females I was working with. The first type, and of course I am generalizing a little bit here, but the first type were those who would really embrace, the real value that some of the more female characteristics, female approaches can bring to leadership, and the true value of that diversity. And the second type, less, but certainly still there in the earlier stages of my career, I came across a couple of female leaders who seemed to think that the best way for them to, let's say, play on an even playing field was to rather emulate male characteristics. and specifically to the extent of behaving in what I thought was a really quite disrespectful way to the men around them in order to almost prove their worth. I can remember going and sitting in a sales pitch with a senior lady at an insurance firm, actually, at that point in time in London. I won't give any more details than that, obviously. And there was one lady at the big board table at the end, surrounded by male colleagues. Myself and my colleagues were right down at the other end of the table. She didn't offer anybody water, anything like this. She had a bar of chocolate and a packet of crisps in front of her that she was helping herself to. And every single time one of her male colleagues around her spoke up or tried to make a contribution in response to a question or a clarification, something like that, she would immediately go into this sort of mode where she would effectively snap at them that, that was the wrong thing, that they hadn't given the right information. And just it really stuck in my mind. I can remember getting the cab afterwards and thinking, that is the worst example of female leadership I've ever seen, because there was obviously a lot of passion and energy there, but it was just being diverted in entirely the wrong way, in terms of this lady obviously trying to make her mark as a senior individual that had more power than anybody else in the room. But there are so many ways to do that. And beating up the people around you is definitely not one of them. So yeah, I did, and very fortunately for me, I met far more of the positive, what I would call the positive female senior leadership role models. But there were a few unpleasant experiences like that along the way. But I'd like to think that things have evolved now, fast forwarding some 15 years, that women don't need to feel that they should behave in that way to prove their worth.
Yeah. Thank you so much for again sharing this story, because this is one of the stories that connected with me a lot. Because when I joined ISG, I was the only woman in the team for many years. And of course, when I was younger, I learned through observation. And the only people around were men. So of course, I was feeling like, am I authentic now, or am I just copying it? Or finding your own way. And especially for younger women, maybe this is a challenge to embrace that female leadership qualities. Yeah, I think Anna, you wanted to mention something else, right?
Well, yes. Once Jill was mentioning these two types, right? I was just laughing because yes, absolutely, Ken Eco had seen it as well. But as Jill mentioned, I've seen much more authentic examples, and well, you can see it in women and in the men area as well. Yeah, so this kind of leaderships where the probably insecure people try to get more power by being more unpolite or I don't know how what is the right word, but I think the true leader is always have a very high what is the right word, right? It's very high attributes, how behavior, right? And it's also about how to create the right environment for your team, for your people, for your company, for your area, so everybody can work efficiently and have some fun. I think it's for men and for women, it's the same. It's for me, it's a true leadership, and it's the easiest way how to do it as a woman, just to be yourself, right? To think what would be in which environment would you like to work yourself, and to provide this environment to other women or to other men. More or less the same. Hard to me to add something which hasn't been said already.
Thank you. Just adding to it just is reinforcing the very topic. Thank you. And also because we were talking about maybe the issues and problems that we're facing, do you think there is common issues, problems, or maybe sacrifices that women have to make and overcome today? And how could we help them to overcome those sacrifices and tackle those problems and issues? Namrata, maybe you want to start?
Sure. Yes, I think there are challenges at times, particularly when, I mean, as a mother of two, I can tell you sometimes to bounce back to work and kind of manage the work as well as the life, and the kids and their schedules and everything is not easy at all. And I've had a few of my team members and come and ask me like, how's it that you've got everything together? Like, how do you manage everything? I said, no, who said I've got everything together? There have been times when I think I've had so many challenges that there have been times when I've forgotten my child's homework, or I've missed their parent-teacher meeting, or I've not gone to their sports meeting. So I've been there too, and I'm sure I continue to face those challenges. So it's not like we've got this all. I know how I can manage both work and life. That's not true at all. But I think the biggest thing that I've learned is, and I know these things can continue to happen, I will still forget some of my parent teacher meeting, or I'll still forget some of the sports meeting. I know I'm going to be there time and again, but over a period of time, I've learned that I can't have the cake and eat it too. So it's I'm trying to work on myself to say that I can't put myself through that kind of a guilt. And I'm sure every mother goes through it, and I go through it as well. So that's probably, I'm a human at the end of the day. This is how much even I can stretch. So if there are things that hasn't happened, then I try and see how to kind of make it happen probably the next time, and I try to work on it and be better at it next time, rather than beat myself about what I've kind of missed or what I've kind of done. So though these are definitely some of the small sacrifices you kind of make, these come part and parcel of the growth. But then I think it's okay, sometimes it happens. Like I said, we're all humans. There's only so much that we can also stretch, but being able to work on it and not beat yourself to it, I think that's most important.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a very good topic. What you mentioned right now, it's always about prioritization, right? It's about taking decision, what would go first. And I think what is specific for women, lots of women put themselves last. I think lots of women just put family first, children first, work first, and then so the prioritization. They own at last. And if you look at the statistics, it's much more women who get burnout. And why? I had a couple of burnout situations in my environment, friends of mine, and even my mentor, the woman I look for. She's got a really, really heavy burnout at one point of time. So I look at these people, why they've got this burnout. And it was about the managing expectation, because they were great. So lots of people put more and more and more on their shoulders, right? And expected more and more and more. And such great personalities want to manage all this expectation, be perfect in every dimension, and deliver always 100% to 100% results. But it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Because sometimes it's just too much, and sometimes it's just expectation are not realistic. I think to manage this expectation, to put realistic expectation on your own, and to have right prioritization, right time management is I think the first thing what we need to be successful, women or men, both. But I think for women it's a bit more important, because I think we want to do everything very good. I think it's in our nature. Yeah.
It definitely is. And you and I were talking about this just a couple of weeks ago, weren't we, actually, Anna? And, I think we just need to give ourselves a break. I was brought up as part of a generation of women that was sold this dream that we can have it all. Well, it's great having access to all of the opportunities that we now enjoy that previous generations didn't. But, the dream that was sold to me was that I should be able to have a high-flying career, still fit in 5 yoga classes a week, turn out 2 beautifully, impeccably dressed, well-mannered children, have a home-cooked meal from scratch using organic vegetables I've grown in my own garden on the table for dinner every night, and so on and so forth. Maybe I exaggerate a little bit. And you can't do it all. And being able, or having the confidence to give yourself a break and to prioritize in the background and decide what's really important, all the way from balancing all of the aforementioned activities to just, having a look at the things that you spend your time on, quite often because other people are making demands on that time, and thinking, actually, is that really important to me? Or am I just trying to please everybody and keep everybody happy? And at a certain point along the way, you've got to make some decisions and prioritization there. I think that, well, I was having a chat to my sister a couple of weeks ago, actually. She runs her own business. And she said she'd been having a chat to one of her friends who's in a similar business, and they both decided that what they really needed was a wife, because they were so busy that they didn't have enough time to do all of the things that they wanted to do, and to keep the house spotless and all of these other things. And so, amongst all the joking, I think that there is something in there in terms of the fact that if you look at the sheer statistics of the situation, then women do still carry quite a lot of the load, if not the physical workload, the mental load of being the brains behind organizing everything that goes on in this really kind of delicate ecosystem of the work life, the family life, and everything else that's going on. And asking for help in the right way around that has been really, really helpful to me. I'm really busy now. I joined ISG, as you said at the start, just not quite even 6 months ago. So yeah, it's bound to be a busy time, right? Getting to know everyone around me, getting to know how the place works, getting my practice established, all of those sorts of things. And actually, this happens to come at a point in time where my partner, who had been having a similar experience, having started a new job a couple of years ago, is now much more settled, much more into his stride. And I was starting to struggle a little bit, just to keep on top of everything else I'm normally on top of. And then I realized that I kind of needed to ask for his help in the right way, not just, can you help me with something, but, can you take responsibility for something? And that's a really different thing. Asking somebody to help you with something which you retain the mental load and you bear the mental, the responsibility for, and actually saying to your partner, can you help me to shoulder some of this responsibility? So I found that's been working really well. And I think I'm on track to have a trained sourdough bread maker in the house within a couple of weeks' time, replacing some of my normal domestic activities. So I'll keep you posted on how I go on that one. But yeah, I couldn't agree more with what the 2 other ladies have said. Think about your priorities, but give yourself a break. If we try and do it all, then we're likely to do not very much of it particularly well. Think about where you spend your time, where you focus, and it's okay to get everything done. It's fine.
And spot on, Jill. It's just and organize the proper support, right? Organize the proper support, because especially if you have children and so on and family, it doesn't work without support, right? To organize the right support is the key.
Absolutely. So when we were talking about already, sometimes there's a sensory overflow, and we need really well established support systems to have a balance. What do you do to just prevent it on a daily basis? Some practical advice for this group here. What do you do?
Am I going to have to confess to everyone what I confess to you that I do if I'm having sensory overload, Sandra? So yeah, the work that we do, the world of consulting, is fraught with so many challenges, opportunities. It's exciting. We work with so many different people, different organizations, but that inevitably brings with it its stressful experiences. And some of those days when you find yourself, in the back-to-back meetings, you have hardly had a chance to have lunch, let alone think about anything else. And, again, maybe this is an age and wisdom combination thing. The older I get, the more I start to really, really recognize the relationship between physical well-being and mental well-being. So exercise is one of my coping mechanisms, and if I've just had the most awful day, well, I do 2 things. I do a couple of Pilates classes a week. I'm training to be a Pilates instructor because, again, I've learned really the value of how the value to me, that is, it doesn't have to be the same for everyone, of the relationship between physical and mental well-being. If I've had a really, really tough day of it, you can't probably see it behind me now, but I have like a weights bench and some weights and stuff like that. I like to do resistance training. So I will clock off, spend an hour, I lift weights, and while I'm doing that, I watch Lady Gaga videos. And that's just, it just works for me every single time. It resets me. And even if I then need to go back and do my next couple of hours afterwards, just to finish off what I needed to get done for the day, taking that time out and just completely switching off by doing something different, it works for me. It's different for everyone.
It's amazing. It's like just knowing yourself, being self-aware, and knowing what your antidote can be, even if it's Lady Gaga. Amazing.
Listen, look, try it.
I will. Okay, is there more advice? What do you do, Namrata?
Yeah, I think I can't agree more. Jill nailed it. It's the difference between not just the physical well-being, but it's also about the mental well-being. And we do tend to get stressed out by the end of the day with non-stop meetings. There's no doubt about it. So my newfound love is cycling, and it's been something that I've been doing for the last more than a couple of years now. And it's fantastic because you're out in the air, fresh air, and you're not in touch with any of the digital devices. So all that I'm focused on is just burning my calories, and I'm walking. It's like one of the best time early in the morning where I can just kind of talk to myself. I can ponder over thoughts. It's fantastic to kind of de-stress. I make it a point that over the weekend, we do have like a cycling community, so we go out cycling with bigger groups where I meet new people, where I kind of meet friends. I'm barely talking about work or anything, but we're just talking about new routes that we can explore, or new adventures that we can talk about. So I think after a long time, and I learned it the hard way, that it was extremely important to find my space. And this is actually my space where it calms me down. I'm able to relieve the stress. It's like a good cycling ride is fantastic. It energizes me for the entire day. So that's how I've kind of found my niche, my space. And I think it's extremely important that everybody finds their space. I mean, it could be Lady Gaga, or it could just be like cycling in open air, or hiking or trekking. But it's super important that we kind of take that time out for ourselves and find our space. So that's really helped.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, finding your space. Anna, what is your space then?
My power tip is power nap. Because I wake up very early and start very early to work, and yes, at some time it's really I'm really very tired. So I think if it works, doesn't work if you have a workshop with a client, but if it works, sometimes we're in a home office, just half an hour power nap. It's really great to me. Yes, and I can work very late in the evening for the same reason, starts very early. So I think sleep is the most important topic to me. Just to have enough sleep, and just to have, and I think this two pieces, one power nap and one in the evening, it's even more powerful if just to have one.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes it's just easy.
And they say, when all this sensory overflooding information come in, the most important is not, because resilience is not about how much we can take on, but how good are we in recharging our batteries. And all what you said is so powerful. Thank you. So, for example, when you're not feeling that confident, because imagine there is someone who is just starting their career, and you're probably more advanced in your careers than others. And so at the beginning, you don't feel always very confident about what you do. So maybe, does that happen to you still today? And what do you do about it to build up that self-esteem? Or what did you do? What were your learnings along the way?
Yes, that's such a good question. Look, I don't think that the situations where I feel nervous, inadequate, all those sorts of things, you know, going into things like really important client interactions are ever going to leave me. And actually, in some ways, I do subscribe to the fact that the type of adrenaline that's caused by some of that insecurity can actually then be your friend when you get into the situation, you know. And I mean, I've watched quite a few. There's a brilliant TED talk, can't remember exactly who it's by at the moment, that talks about why cortisone, the stress hormone, is actually a good thing, a positive thing, you know, if you think about channeling it right. So yes, you know, depending on the context, depending on the nature of the client, depending on all sorts of things, where we are in our business cycle, how important it is to get that result. Of course, I still get nervous. You know, it's just par for the course. On the other hand, I think, you know, I've been through enough of this now to know that most of the time it turns out okay. So that, you know, the benefit of that experience, if you like, helps me to get through those tough situations. So I think people probably have their own sort of coping mechanisms and ways in which they're preparing. I mean, the first thing I do, which is probably the really obvious thing, is just to always make sure that I am prepared. If I know my subject matter, then, you know, everything else is manageable, sort of, you know, nerves and situational, that sort of thing. And the second thing, bit of practical advice, again, it might work for me, it might not work for everyone. Another TED talk, a few of you might have seen it, would be the one by, I think it's Amy Cuddy, about power poses. Like, it might make you feel ridiculous, but it works. I have been known to go stand in a bathroom cubicle in a client office with those few minutes remaining before the big pitch, and, you know, stand there like this, and, you know, all of that. Yeah. And actually, I think there's just a really basic bit of science there, but yeah, it works. So I'd recommend that to anybody who, you know, doesn't mind finding a place to hide and strike some power poses.
That is a very practical advice. Thank you so much. Is there more?
Yeah, and as a practical advice, it works also very good. Just to store the success experience you have. For example, if you have a successful pitch, yeah, if you have you win a deal against the very strong competition, or you have very good pitch in the conference, or just got some spot on award because you provided a very good contribution or helped somebody a lot. Just, I think it's important to store it. Just to store. Imagine you have a database. You can store this experience in the database, and then you can replay in a difficult situation where you don't feel secure and confident. Just put the replay button, and then it will put you in the same situation where you had success, and it will help you to have the success once again, because it will be just the continue of the same situation you had in the past.
Exactly. I think in the neuro-linguistic program, you call it to anchor such good quality.
Yeah, exactly. To anchor. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Namrata, you were just about to add your comment.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Anna, because I think as a person, I do have a tendency to underestimate myself a lot and not feel confident. You know, every time I'm either getting on a stage or getting in front of a client or whatever it is. And the one thing over a period of time that I've learned is not to run away from that situation. But like Anna mentioned, think about what the outcome will look like if I were to deliver this. And just keeping that in mind, or even maybe, you know, just kind of think about, okay, what can be the worst case? And it's not life threatening at the end of the day. There's no harm in trying. So you kind of motivate yourself, and then you go there. And then ultimately it turns out completely okay. I mean, I can just share my index example, for instance. When I was asked to be on the index and share that stage with like some of the industry stalwarts, it was like, no way I can do that. I can never be on the stage. But over a period of time, you know, the team has been so supportive, and I've learned that it's not too bad, you know. So I think one thing is we should not run away from trying it. It's really important. Every single time is going to be challenging, but it only makes you better. And when you think about how better it becomes and what the outcome is, it's always fantastic. So we really need to push ourselves to that.
Yeah, you're so right. Like practice, 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 and making the experience for your own, right? So you can store it and anchor it, and then become friend with cortisol and all the adrenaline that pumps through your body, right? So, because I was also wondering, some of us are at the start of their career and we would never know how we would perform in our next role, maybe as a new people manager, maybe as a new project lead at a new client. So, as we are very young, sometimes we do not know how to deal with the future, how to handle uncertainty. Until you were mentioning becoming friends with cortisol. Is there something else we could do to make the future more manageable for us, or just being friends with the unknown?
Well, I think there's a bit of a skill in embracing uncertainty, and I think that ability to perform well in uncertain new circumstances certainly does increase the more times you've done it. So I thought that much is probably obvious, but look, I'm going to come back to some of the comments that Anna made a lot earlier in the conversation. The best thing that you can possibly do in any situation surrounded by myriad uncertainties is to be yourself, because that's a real certainty. And if you're being yourself, you are able, in my opinion, to navigate any given situation to your best ability. And I said it before, I'll say it again. I know it's easy to say and perhaps less easy to do when you see so many fantastic people around you and you want to test out some of those ingredients, some of those little bits of magic, the way that you see other people performing. Absolutely take your inspiration. I'm all for that. But just find a way to do it that is true to your authentic self. And that will equip you with the skills to get through the lion's share of the tough professional situations that you find yourself confronted with.
Such good piece of advice. Thank you. Would someone else like to add something?
Yeah, I think to manage the new situation, to leave the comfort zone, I think the most important thing to me, at least, to understand how should success would looks like. Mm-hmm. Just to have a kind of dream, right? We don't know how it will be, but just to have, I don't know, 3 ideas. How I would say it has been great success. And then if you can imagine at the end how it will look like, then it's easier then to understand, to structure a bit, right? What are the possible steps to achieve it? And then I think the third phase to break it into the realistic first steps. Very realistic. Because if it already starts with an unrealistic expectation, it possibly will be the hard start. But if we will start with smaller step in the right direction, it will help us to understand, okay, we are moving ourselves already in the right direction, and we know already, we have an idea how it should look like at the end. And all the way around will be just putting the realistic step in front of us and still to have a right picture how it should look like at the end. That's it.
That's so true. So true. Namrata.
Yeah, I think I would just kind of go back to the point that I made that without attempting it, there's no way you can know what exactly it is. And I think just taking a sincere approach to it, giving it your 100% in terms of whatever maybe the role is, trying to understand that and working towards the end objective becomes extremely important. But again, without trying, we wouldn't know whether what will be the outcome. And I think it's important to sort of try that, give it your best, and then the outcome will just follow through.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's so true. Sometimes, really, as you said, it's about trying and don't have the fear of failure. Of course, you could fail, but as long as you do something about it, you're the active person, and you only fail unless you stop. And as long as you're trying, you're not failing. So it's a shift of perspective, and when you probably approach it with a learning mindset, you're already a winner, because every challenge, every problem, or every fail is learning, right?
Absolutely. You nailed that.
So,
And you picked up on a great word there, actually, Sandra, which is perspective. Sometimes when you're building up to a particular situation, which you've got a lot of nervous energy attaching to, it can really seem all consuming. You know, put it back in perspective of life and the universe, you know, and what is the absolute worst thing that can happen? Namratha spoke about this a bit earlier in the conversation. If you do not get the result that you want, it's always, always a learning experience. And, you know, I would love to say that by the time I'm at this stage in my career with all of my experience behind me, that those nerves are no longer there. And every time I go in, I win, or I look back after my hour of pitching, whatever it is I'm pitching, and go, yep, that was spot on. I could not have done any better than that. That never happens. But, you know, if you carry on attaching perspective to it, I think it can help you to relax a little bit. And, you know, a bit of practical advice. If you're really, really nervous about a particular, you know, session, I guess I keep relating it back to client interactions. It doesn't necessarily have to be with clients, it can be all sorts of things. Just, you know, I've spent time not role playing. That's always a little bit sort of, I mean, it can be helpful, but I've always found it a little bit false. But, you know, just spending an hour with somebody beforehand, just chewing over, you know, what might be the awkward questions which come up here? How am I going to explain this? What am I going to say about that? Which bits of this am I feeling really nervous about? And just getting some, you know, friendly dialogue going with a trusted colleague about those things can just help me to relax and loosen up around the edges of those things that I'm feeling a bit less comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's about like what could be, or you're making yourself assumptions, what could happen, and you're visualizing your future, you're doing some scenarios, and by that, the future is already a little bit experienced by yourself by just doing the exercise, right?
Yeah, and then for a little bit less scary.
Exactly. Wonderful. Okay, so we have our first question in the chat. So how could women support other women at ISG, and also how could men support women on their journey? What do you think?
I might go for the second part of that question. And how can men support women? I think it really goes back to the fact it's incumbent on all of us to recognize that we can't just carry on making the next generation of leaders in our own mold, and starting to recognize and respect diversity of styles, of characteristics, of qualities, and attach merit to those, even if they aren't necessarily features or hallmarks of our own way of doing things. And it really comes back to the whole topic around, you know, the unconscious bias, which, you know, we all receive the training. You know, I think it's really, really hard to look in the mirror and go, yeah, I probably do that. I probably do favor people who, you know, behave in the same way as me, who have very similar approaches to me. And so I suppose what I'm trying to say is, as I look across an organization that I don't have the official stats, actually, I'm sure somebody do, that probably is still a little bit more male dominated versus female, I think I would just appeal to every single one of those males to take a pause and attach value to characteristics which might not necessarily be their own.
Then let me take the first part. The first part, yes, how women can help women. And I think it's just about exchange. I think it's just about be open and be accessible. And if anybody want to ask some question or exchange experience, just let's exchange. So probably to have this, I mean, now the session now, it's already about it, right? And I think it's go the right direction. But of course, if there are any question which cannot be answered today in the chat, just approach any of us. We can chat, we can discuss, we can support.
Thank you. That is a great offer, Anna. Thank you. And Raja, what do you think? How should women support other women, or how can men support other women?
Absolutely. I think as both Jill and Anna mentioned, One is in terms of women supporting women at ISG. It's sharing all the experiences, the ups and downs that we've gone through, anything that might help somebody's career, or even for that matter, anything that we can help in terms of, let's say, the balancing of personal life and official life, which is one of the most commonly asked questions by multiple women. Back in India office, a lot of them have actually approached me and asked me about those. So just being able to help them cope with some of those situations, help them with sharing our experiences of how we have managed, or for that matter, even in terms of work, how did I approach any of the projects? Just having that conversation in itself is so it's such a big relief for people that I'm not the only one who's going through this. There are others also kind of go through. So what is it that I can do is, so it's basically grow, and you kind of grow along with others, you take them also along that journey. I think it itself is like a biggest thing of how we can help and celebrating each other's success. I think those are small steps that we can actually take to make them feel comfortable, make them feel at home. And as far as men is concerned, I think I've been very lucky to have really good male bosses all along and at ISG. I think they've always been very empathetic towards any kind of situations that we may have, both on the official front or the personal front. They understand, giving that time, giving that understanding. I think that becomes extremely important. There's, as Jill mentioned, bringing zero bias in mind. I think that's extremely important to kind of how they can actually support, and not turning a blind eye to any kind of situations that we may have. That's most important, because I think most of them would agree that we do have some certain situations that becomes extremely difficult for us to express at a workplace, and just being able to sort of being empathetic towards those situations makes a huge difference to how we can approach things.
Yeah. Anna?
Yeah, probably one additional point is just to grow our community, right? To talk to your friends, to your female friends, and to grow a community, because I think for lots of us, the situation that in our company we have a large amount of very successful women in every geography is a very important one. Once I have interviews, and the new hires or the interview partner see that we have a lot of women in a leading position, it's really very important. I think to grow our community, to talk to our friends, yeah, and to attract them for ISG would be another one.
Exactly, yeah. It's about sharing our stories, supporting each other, celebrating each other, growing together, being just there for another. I think that's really the essence of how we can support each other and level each other up, because that's giving to the universe and you will receive from the universe. Right, so I see that we only have a few minutes left, so maybe let's have one final question. So when you look back at your very young self, is there maybe a piece of advice that you would give your younger self, something that you would like to say to your young 5-year-old self, maybe?
I think just 2 things. First, relax. Don't be afraid of anything. And the second, have a good time management.
Very well said.
Very good tips. I think if my now self could give any advice back to my younger self, it would just be, again, easy to say, but just believe in yourself. There's a certain art, I think, to having confidence in yourself, true confidence, and therefore belief in yourself, rather than factory setting, being, automatically doubting, questioning, am I good enough? Am I going to be able to do this? Why should I be here rather than somebody else? And, it took me a long time, I think, to truly get to the point where I can honestly say that I have confidence in myself and I believe in myself, years and years and years. So, if there was a magic wand I could wave, over my 5-year-old self to equip me for all that was going to come growing up and making my way ahead in life, then it would be that. And time management, good, yes, every day.
Thank you. So Namrata, you have the last word.
Thank you. I think such fabulous points. I would just say, don't hesitate to explore. Just keep exploring, keep experimenting, keep trying. That automatically, I think, helps sort of build your confidence. It's okay even if you fail, but just exploring, I think, is really important. Just to understand and discover oneself. So I would say just explore.
Thank you so much. What wonderful pieces of advice. Thank you. And yeah, I can't believe that the past hour has gone already. I just want to end and say thank you. Thank you for being such inspirational leaders and sharing these insights with us. And thank you for taking the time here, and really just thank you for being you, being the wonderful women you are. I have again learned so much from you all, so thank you. And also thank you to our organizers, Laura Lepay, Hannah Stapleton, Prativa Salvan, Laura Haprick, and Hannah Ward. You made this all happen, so thank you very much. And have a happy Women's Day.
Thank you.
It was really, really fun.
Yes.
Thanks
Happy
for
Women's
having us
Day.
here.